I'm trying to figure out what comes next for learning, and the answers are surprisingly unsatisfying the more I dig, whether it's because there are systemic things in the way, a lack of imagination on the parts of our systems, sense of malaise and disconnectedness from students, underpaid faculty and staff, and just this feeling that no matter what we do, it's impossible to escape the onslaught of the technology that's trying to make learning feel like some kind of extractive, exploitative process. And yet, I'm not giving up hope. I am digging in the literature and in ways that aren't always necessarily super obvious, like looking into how to build studios, design studios, so that people can, think of the classroom as a shared design learning space. Books like Meaningful Learning in Action that digs into the theory of meaningful learning, that's about helping students understand how to develop bodies of knowledge rather than memorize single ideas. This book called Inside the Box, which is proven techniques to build creativity and resilience. Cognitive Apprenticeship. I've been really big on this one because this one's all about how we help experts, share their expertise with someone else and actually model and visualize the way that experts think to others so that it can be more easily adopted. And I think in a world where we're seeing that artificial intelligence is pretending to be some kind of personal tutor, at least that's what the companies want us to think, getting people to explain expertise more effectively is going to be a really interesting way to develop connections within people. Questions. This is a small book and it's all about how we can ask more meaningful questions in crazy, chaotic times like we're at right now. This simple book on facilitation, honestly, I didn't need this by the time I bought it, but it has got some fantastic reminders in it for those of you who are dipping your feet into facilitating classes today. Then, this one's always a classic of mine. It's called Figure It Out. This is kind of a design book, but really it's a book about how to form systems of knowledge in your head. And it's got some of the best stuff out there, especially chapter 11. I'll put a link to all this stuff in the description of this video below. Then, Grading for Growth. This book has so many different ways to grade things differently. I'm still not sure how I feel about this one because despite it being alternative grading and there's some stuff in there that's interesting like specifications grading, it fundamentally still feels like it's meant to fit in the system that we have today. And then the last one is It's All a Game. This is a history of board games and I'm digging into this right now because I want to rethink the classroom, rethink learning experiences and training experiences in general as something like a game. And why games? Because they are inherently systems. And when we want to try and model this chaotic world outside to the people that we're training and teaching, we need to think of the way we teach them as a way of doing systems thinking and a way of expanding their understanding of how if you pull this lever, something will happen over here and the results might not always be so expected. And board games and video games are a fantastic way to do that. But even with all this, I still feel kind of stuck because I feel this need to maybe find a way to do it with AI or to help people understand how AI fits into that for some reason, even though that's not always gonna be important or even necessary. And yet, as part of my self-imposed responsibility to form a better understanding of what tools are gonna be available to both teachers and students, I have been tinkering around with something in AI Studio. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Over here we have the Cognitive Architect, a small tool I pumped out with Gemini's AI Studio to create the different types of friction that are, in the literature of how our brains understand information. Now, this became a fascination of mine because, I'm gonna zoom back in on my face for this, as I was reading the different books, I came across this theme over and over, whether it was in games, in creating workshops, in building in studio environments, that we need to actually struggle productively to learn well. And when people hear this when it comes to schooling, they tend to assume that we mean exams are hard and that's a good thing, or teachers should be, punitive and that's a good thing because that's the struggle. But that's a pretty cheap definition of struggle, honestly. When I think of friction, I think of struggle, especially as someone who's been a gamer for a very long time, It's the ability to create experiences that are hard in a way that's fun or in a way that's challenging because the problem is itself challenging, not because of some artificial guardrails that we've put around it, like you're not allowed to bring your book into this exam. Instead, I'm thinking of, you can't bring your book because you're in an operating room and you need to be able to draw on information in a high stress environment that's an actual simulation of a real place. That's the kind of good friction that I'm thinking about. And it turned out that out there in the world of academic and education research, somebody has done work on this, and there are definitions of friction out there, and some of them are competing. So, for example, we have cognitive disequilibrium by Jean Piaget. We have productive struggle, which is a constructivist view on how we should fail. There's the desirable difficulty, productive failure by Manu Kapoor. And all these four are technically slightly different, but I wanted to see if it was possible to create methods to highlight the difference in their difficulty. Let me show you what I mean. So let's start with cognitive disequilibrium. And if I click Start Challenge here, it actually is powered by Google's Gemini 2.5 AI to create an exercise that's going to be unique. Here it says if you draw a bowling ball, approximately 6 kilos and a feather from the exact same height, which will hit the ground first. And this is in a vacuum chamber, right? And this is a classic problem, but I'm going to answer it incorrectly just to see what happens. I'm going to put the bowling ball, and then I'm going to click Submit Answer. And it says, not quite, consider the framework principles and try again. And then it'll give me an analysis and explain the pedagogical insight to me. Now, this didn't end up being the kind of magical experience I wanted to share with the students, because actually I didn't want this to be something for teachers. I wanted it to be a way for the students to experience the different types of productive struggle and see for themselves how they could maybe leverage them to get the right kinds of friction. See, even with that magical AI and me trying really hard to come up with something that shows the comparison between the different types of friction and struggle, it was still honestly so difficult to touch on the edges of this thing that I'm trying to touch upon, which is like the learning experience itself and the inner workings of the brain and how that can create the sense that learning is happening, and more than that, the sense that learning is this fun, beautiful thing that we should want. And even more problematic is that I was kind of trying to dump this onto the students, right, by helping them understand these types of friction, which I still think is a good thing, although I don't think it's a good thing in this interface. And maybe if I fiddle around a bit more, it can get to somewhere more interesting, although I don't think so. Because I think that you can't just make a UI out of some of these types of friction or some of these learning theories that I'm trying to pick up in all of these books. These are the kinds of things you have to actually experience over time with people, socially compare towards yourself over time, towards others in your group, against what the AI outputs and how you feel about that, and against what an expert like an instructor tells you and how you feel about that. There are so many things that learners have to compare themselves against to actually understand the full threshold and the full spectrum of what it means to learn. And here I am, without clear answers. But I want to start these conversations more, and I want to keep having them, and I have been having them. And I, recently put out this like Canadian University AI thing that you can see in the link in the top right now, top right. Where I'm trying to like gather all the AI policies and put them in one place for people to see them across Canada. I've built other stuff on my YouTube channel, which you can go check out, trying to give the teachers AI that helps them form better groups and deepen conversation. And it's, it's just a work in progress. It's an open question. And I think that's been most of all of this too, is all of this content itself is an open question, an invitation for anyone watching this still to come say hello. And, what do you think? Have you been trying to play with similar stuff? And where does someone asking the kinds of questions I'm asking go from here? Hit me up in the comments and let me know. See you next time.